Welcome to another episode of the Clarity Digital Podcast. I'm your host, Al Sefati, and in this episode, I'm joined by Bill Hartzer, a seasoned expert in search engine optimization, domain name services, and internet-related legal cases. With decades of experience, Bill shares insights on the evolution of search engines, the value of domain names, and his fascinating work as an expert witness. Let's dive in. Hi, Bill. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Thank you for accepting my invite and joining our podcast. I know your time is valuable. I really appreciate you being here.
Sure.
We'd love to learn, for our audience, if you don't mind introducing yourself, your personal and professional experience, especially in the space of SEO.
Sure. I started, I guess back in the 90s, actually I was, doing webmaster and some technical things with the company that I worked for was an international telecom software company. And then I started doing content for them and so forth and their websites and at that time we had a company intranet, internal website for employees. And I kind of moved into after that, it kind of, that gave me a more international experience where we had actually 9 different public facing websites that were in 9 different languages. So it was interesting at that point, even in the late 90s and early 2000s, to do essentially SEO in different languages, the concepts. It's interesting because the concepts, keyword and title tag and meta description tag and, mentioning the keyword on the page, et cetera, those basic concepts really over the years, haven't changed much. I know we're, now in the AI timeframe, but that's kind of interesting because that's kind of the SEO basics, get it. And it hasn't changed since the early 2000s. I would say that you start off looking at the basics of just having a search engine friendly site that can get crawled and indexed and so forth. Mm-hmm. And then I moved in the agency world and did kind of that. I was in-house, did the agency world where I moved up from SEO specialist and SEO director, and I'll have all the different positions. A lot of experience in different industries, which was good during my career. I ran an agency for a while. And then I went, 2016, which is almost next year, actually, it'll be, 10 years that I've been running my own agency. So I've done just about from content to affiliate. We'll get into a little bit of the domain name industry and domain names because I sold my first domain name back in 1998 and kind of been buying and selling domain names and buying expired domain names and putting up sites and so forth. And I've seen that, that industry change a lot as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, not at all. No.
Okay, cool. Let's just jump into that since you brought it up. I have bought and sold domain names many years ago. Is that still a thing? Do .coms matter as much anymore? My own agency's website is .agency because claritydigital.com was taken with someone else. I was like, okay, I'm an SEO guy. I can rank that agency and it is ranking. So I guess, is buying and selling domains still a thing? And is it still as valuable for businesses?
Yeah, actually it's interesting because the values have just been, especially for .com domain names, the values have just skyrocketed over the years.
Oh.
And now, I mean, people do so, especially with what I've also noticed is that a lot of other countries, for example, the UK, 10 years ago in the UK, they were all still using .co.uk. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen is there's a lot more, they want .com a lot more, and they're launching website, UK based companies are launching websites on .com a lot more often. And, as part of my business is in, domain name services. And I actually have an outbound type of service that, I have. Yeah. So I still have a portfolio maybe of, hundreds of domains. And I have a service where essentially I'm using This could probably be a whole other discussion, but I'm using Pitchbox, which is a traditional kind of SEO software and link building software that's been around
I
for
remember that.
years. I'm actually using Pitchbox to sell domain names.
Wow.
And so it's interesting because the concept, it's the same if you have a keyword.com or keyword.co or whatever it is, or .agency. The concept is you can go to Google and type in a keyword,
And ranks, yeah.
find all of the, if you have a domain name, find all of the, when you do a search for that keyword, you find those are all companies, at least in the top 100 results, companies that are potential buyers because they're showing up for that particular keyword.
Mhm.
I have tanningsalon.co. I threw search for tanning salon and I found hundreds and hundreds of potential buyers for tanningsalon.co. And basically Pitchbox will then find that list of domains, find all the owners, potential owners, and you can set up a drip email campaign to pitch the sale of that particular domain to all the potential, tanning salons. So I do that for my personal domains and other people's domains as well. So, because kind of combining the SEO world with keywords, with domains to sell domains. And to be honest with you, a couple of days before Christmas this year, I had a campaign go out, and within 30 minutes, we had a domain name sold.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so because we just reach out to the proper potential buyers.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so yeah, it definitely.
I mean, I get those emails too, and then they're pretty, sometimes they grab my attention because so chances are that could actually be you or someone like you, right?
Yeah, so a domain, to be honest with you, I mean, the values, especially for .com domain names, there's less and less of them. And I'm seeing two things. Domain names that for generic names, a domain name that 5 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago would be $1,000 is now going for 10,000 or more.
Wow.
So in the past 5 to 10 years, at least 10 times the amount. Now, we're also seeing, though, which is interesting, a lot of domain names that really you wouldn't think that would be valuable, but they have SEO value. So they have backlinks, they
Hmm.
have a history of being used, etc. And it might be Joe's Fish Food Restaurant.com. Okay.
Yeah.
Which really just the domain name itself doesn't have any value, but that could potentially on the domain name auctions go for $1,000, $2,000, $5,000. I've seen some weird ones. The domain industry and domainers will just scratching their heads of why this domain is going for $20,000. Well, it's
Think.
possible because of the expired domain market and so forth.
Well, that's great. I knew domains are still valuable because I look for them, and I just didn't know if the market is still as big as it used to be, and it sounds like it is, and in some cases, got even bigger. What are
Yes, it
some?
definitely is. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's going to going to continue. And the only issue is the people in the domain industry and SEOs know that the domain names go for a lot of money now. However, the people who are not in the domain industry, typical business owner,
Hmm.
they're still looking at, like a geo name,
Oh.
Dallas Home Inspection. Well,
Mhm.
that's a name that really would go for, $2,000 to $3,000 now. But the Dallas Home Inspectors don't really realize that it's such a valuable thing now. And, they wouldn't pay more than, $200 or $300 for it. And so their expectations, and they don't, understand that, how really valuable those, they are now.
Yeah. No, that's really good to know because I have a few domain names that I was thinking about letting expire, and I think I'm going to keep them just in case. Talking about that, what are some of the legal implications of when you're buying and selling domains? Copyrights, things of that nature. Do you deal with any of that?
I do. So one of my expertise is actually domain name recovery and and recovering stolen domain names.
Yeah.
We have typically the typical stolen domain name would be there's a GoDaddy account, the IT guy or some employee has access to the GoDaddy account. They leave the company and they go in the GoDaddy account and they, transfer the company's name to themselves and so forth. There's, and then hacking people hacking into
Yeah.
network solutions accounts and so forth.
Hmm.
And that's a typical happens a lot. The other issue, which is interesting, kind of has an SEO twist to it. Let me kind of explain the story. Basically,
Sure.
I was in the 1970s in Iowa. I think it was Altoona, Iowa. There was a family who had a golf course.
Hmm.
Okay. They had this golf course and it had a unique name on it. At one point, the family sold in the 90s, late 90s. They had a website, AOL email address, and phone number. At some point, the family sold the golf course to the city, and the city made it a public golf course. Well, the city actually ended up not renewing the domain name and it just kind of fell off. The city just ran it, but kind of ran it in the ground. And then basically the city decided to sell it and put it up at auction. And this investor group bought it and put $15 million into renovating the clubhouse and adding a pool and making it really a high class private golf course. So during that time, so it turns out so somebody in California and actually grabbed the expired domain name. They went to archive.org and copied the old website as it was with AOL email address, old phone number, photos of the family members, and put the website back up. And then in the bottom, they put links to gambling affiliate links.
Hmm.
Okay. And a lot of SEOs, kind of, that's what I've kind of run across is over the years, there's SEOs more on the black hat side that will actually go in archive.org. And I think there's actually some software, a couple different software will actually, you can, go and recover the site from, all the pages of the site and all the files and the images and so forth. The issue is that basically this new investor group, the site was ranking for that particular name of the golf course, and but the investor group had no control over this fake website. And not only that, there were, gambling in Iowa is very frowned upon. I guess it's illegal. So, they had issues with gambling, their golf course promoting, gambling sites and betting sites and so forth. So it
Yeah.
didn't look very good for them. So anyway, so basically we ended up filing I do a lot of forensic domain name research and forensic website ownership research and so forth. And so I was actually able to track down the owner, forensically. You can look at the page source of a site and you could use, for example, if they have Google Analytics, you can take the Google Analytics code, put that in a code search engine and find all the websites that someone owns
Yeah.
because the part of the Google Analytics code is the same on all the sites that you own.
Yeah.
Okay.
Smart.
And
Very
so I
smart.
was able to track down this owner and basically he got sued for a huge amount of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, because he had copied the site and put the old site back up. And then he filed, the investor group filed a UDRP domain name dispute, which they clearly won because he was faking he was the company or, that golf course and so forth. So there was some really big legal implications with the lawsuit and just for copying grabbing an expired domain and putting it up,
Yeah.
which you kind of have to watch on that. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. Well, you can grab expired domains. You kind of still have to watch the domain name itself because somebody still owns that content. Even if it's on archive.org, you did not create that content. You didn't pay somebody to write the content. You didn't have AI write the content for you, etc. The legal issue is, as an SEO, you really need to create your own content. Now, The domain name itself, if it's, you know, Joe's Fish Food Restaurant.com, still, even if Joe's Fish Food Restaurant burned down and it's not there anymore, well, Joe still owns the content of the website and the photos, the images. So there's kind of a, even if that's on archive.org, even if it's just the domain name itself, he might decide that he still wants it, and he's going to put up a new fish food restaurant somewhere else, etc. So yeah, definitely, so Joe still owns the kind of the common law trademark on that domain. There's a lot of legal issues. We just need to go after, either get permission from the previous owner, which in a lot of cases, it's fairly easy to do if you can find them, or basically just go ahead and create your own content. Now,
Yeah.
one of the things to do is to actually just watch the 404s or get the old URLs, or like go into Majestic and get all the pages of that site. You get all the pages, all the URLs that used to exist, all the internal pages that have links to them, and just create a site using those URLs. That's domain.com/about. Don't use /about us, use /about like it was before.
Yeah.
And, the crawlers still know the old URLs. They're probably still crawling.
But the content is different.
And yeah. And so basically, that's one way to do it, is to now, establish the old URLs, and, use your own content.
So you keep the taxonomy the same as it was, but have unique content so it's not copyrighted.
But yeah, that does have some benefits to it.
Well, what about, and this will kind of like, date me, but like I remember way back in the day, there was this guy, his name was Mike, and then his last name started with R, and then he launched a software company. So he had the domain name Microsoft. I don't know if you remember that story, but it was Mike with a K-E. Microsoft.com sent him a cease and desist letter. Now, this guy was smart enough to throw that cease and desist letter in a trash can and say, hey, kind of talk to my lawyers. But is there any, assuming you don't do any of that stuff, you don't copy the content, you don't copy the taxonomy, is there any legal challenges if you were to buy a domain name? I mean, can you copyright the domain name? I mean, like maybe Nike.com, if they forget to renew their domain, but like, have you run into any case without the copywriting material, just the domain legal issues? Have you run into any
Yeah.
of that?
So basically, yeah. So the classic case is, that all the domain, industry knows about is Nissan.com, NIS. And Nissan.com basically has, and there was a guy who is, he has Nissan computers at Nissan.com, and his last name was Nissan, Yuri Nissan. And he, was assistant, on using, Nissan and for whatever price. And there were legal challenges. There were lots of, Nissan, the auto manufacturer, has really tried over the years to get it. And, he, a couple of years ago, passed away, and his estate, continued to not let it go to, Nissan, the automotive manufacturer. So there's that. It really comes down to use. I mean, for example, a use of the domain name. And that comes into a lot of different issues because of the fact that potential issues, because let's look at Apple.com, Apple. And as long as you are not using it as a computer, say you're selling computers or anything like that, and even kind of related to the tech industry, as long as you're using it, with a different use, that's typically,
Like if I was selling apples, that would be okay.
yes. So, if you look at, and the other thing is that there's things like, if you do have a name, you'd actually do need to show usage of it nowadays.
Yeah. Got it.
Because there's, for example, there's a domain, a four-letter domain, and I've been working with this guy, and the problem is his domain was stolen. It's a, four-letter pronounceable word. It's worth a lot of money, but he could file a UDRP domain name dispute, and that would be, say, okay, I've had the name and I've been using it, and he's been using it for email for years. And basically somebody got into an account and transferred it to themselves. and he hasn't been able to get it back. He could file the dispute and saying, yes, I've been using this name, but he's been using it for email only. And the name, he has a one-page kind of website that has just, 2 or 3 words on it. So is
Mhm.
not really, he cannot claim what we call a common law trademark. And so, in that case, he can't really claim that, oh, well, he's known as, that name. And that's kind of the issue. And so, what, if you look at a good example would be oj.com, letter O, letter J.com. Okay. There's been, there's a lot of companies who sell orange juice or make orange juice who would love to have that name. However, what they strategically have done is created a web page on that and make it look like they're a company and they are related to orange juice and so forth. And
Yeah.
so if somebody comes along and says, well, that they have the right to the name rather than this person who owns it, they can claim that, yes, their website is known as oj.com and so
It would
forth.
be using.
I'm not a trademark attorney. I haven't
Yeah.
testified in court, domain name issues, similar issues like keywords and keyword usage and so forth. I have written and helped write domain name disputes in the past. One particular one, for example, patterns.com, Patterns. There's a software company out of Florida that has used patterns.com for years as their software sales and service and so forth. And they've used, had a big website on it. And that domain name was stolen, et cetera. And we're able to get that domain back by basically claiming the fact that they were using it and they were known as patterns, and they were able to get back that domain name through a UDRP, domain name dispute.
That's really good stuff. And I'm glad to know this information. I've had to deal with it in the past. Luckily, I didn't have to get that deep, and it was just a matter of a little bit of negotiation. When I forgot to renew one of my domains, and it was terrible when I had to deal with it. But it's good to know that someone like you actually has expertise in it that can go
Yeah,
deeper.
I do get people who have had their domain name on and the credit cards were
The credit
fine
card
and
expires.
everything, and they had backup credit cards
Oh,
and thing, and the auto renew failed, and the domain name expired, and they lost it that way.
yeah.
They've had people who just didn't were they had their name and they had a website email usage and so forth. They just failed to renew it. Somebody from another country got the expired domain and they then want $5,000 to $10,000 to buy it back. So I definitely would use the 2FA and all of the typical security things that you do on your accounts. If you're a company, you definitely want to make sure that have a limited number of people access. There was a company that had only used a Gmail account for all the email of the company, and they had 32 employees, and all 32 employees had access to that Gmail account and were using it to send and receive messages to their customers and so forth.
Wow.
And for some reason, somebody logged into the GoDaddy account and the domain was gone.
Oh,
And so
wow.
they went in, and their website was down and it, hurt their business because they lost the domain name. So, yeah, so it happens. Renew for several years in advance. But if somebody then gets, into your account, you can claim that, oh, well, it didn't expire. I had it, it's mine. And this, there's also always been question about who is privacy. And, if you're a company and you have your name, address, and phone number on your website, then there's absolutely no reason at all to, put your domain name under privacy because, they already have
Yeah.
access to your office address and everything. That can actually help you because if somebody gets in your domain name account and transfers it out or puts it in there, they'll always put who is privacy on there. So if you have your company information on there, then you can show it's a lot easier when you're dealing with the registrars and recovery. I have always said, I've always, get a UPS address, get a
Mhm.
virtual address, get a something and put, your email address and your phone number on your WHOIS record. I know GDPR came into effect, 5 years ago or so, and all the domain name registrars just automatically put everything on WHOIS privacy, and I'm not really a big fan of that, actually. There's a very good reason that, yes, if depending on various, there's a lot of good reasons to have WHOIS privacy to need it. But if you're in business and you have, there's other easy ways, to find the company address. There's really not any reason in particular to have, the WHOIS under privacy. But
Yeah, I've always questioned why do I even need this? Like, and then pay an additional 10, 15, whatever it is, dollars to pay for what, why? Like you said, they're gonna find out who we are anyways, unless you have something to hide or you're into business of buying and selling domains
yeah, I
and
mean,
something
I
like
might
that.
have a personal website,
Yeah,
and there's some, maybe you have some an X that doesn't, doesn't need to know your address and so
yeah,
forth. And
yeah,
okay,
exactly.
no, that's perfectly very legit. I mean, it's a very needed in a lot of situations. It is, and but uh, I've seen the worst of it where they've always had it under WHOIS privacy, and it's difficult to prove that the company actually owned that domain name because the WHOIS privacy has always been on there. And then somebody, when they stole the name, and so it's much more difficult to prove, ownership.
Yeah.
And so I've seen the worst case scenarios. And so that makes me kind of say, well, I'd rather not put it under WHOIS privacy.
Yeah, gotcha. Really good insights. So now that we're talking about legal issues, I know you offer other type of SEO related legal issues like expert witness and other type of
Sure.
services. Do you mind talking about that a little bit? I mean, I know I've been an expert witness back in the days when I was programming, but I'm trying to connect the dots on SEO. What is, obviously in programming can have proprietary codes or whatnot. On the SEO and what type of scenarios and cases you have to deal with?
There's a lot of cases, I've done probably in the past 5 years, I've done 30 to 40, maybe 50 cases.
Wow.
Yeah, that
Hmm.
I've been, as an expert witness. And it's interesting because I can only point to maybe two or three cases that were actually pure kind of what you and I would call SEO cases. Now, a lot of them, so the majority of the cases just involved something related to the internet. And, one case I can't really get into too much detail, but for example, one of the cases that I'm working on, I had a call this morning regarding that there was a company that used three of the main partners' names,
Hmm.
like Smith, Charles, and let's say Smith, Charles, and Jones.
Hmm.
Okay. And they had smithcharlesjones.com.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of those partners left the company. Charles, Rob Charles, they're all made up names, but Charles left the company. Well, the company continued to use Smith, Charles, and Jones as the company name. Even the year, continued to do YouTube videos, continued to do, have it on their sign and so forth. They had it on their Google Maps listings. That's the name of their company, but Jones or Charles rather left the company. So there's no Charles anymore.
Yeah.
But the company continued to, even on the guy, LinkedIn profile, they still had the company name. And so what should have done is the company should have rebranded,
Yeah.
to maybe jonesmith.com and rather than Jones Charles Smith, but they never did. And so, so the guy is, basically suing them. And so anyway, it's coming down to that, I'm being brought in as kind of an internet and search expert to provide, okay, to help say, okay, well, they didn't do that, but how many, you know, to help provide some monetary value. How many searches a month for that company name
Oh,
are
gotcha.
there every month?
Mhm.
Uh, and because they're still using that. How does, one of the issues is, okay, the signage outside the company or actually on the building, on the, the name of the name of the company's on the outside of the building.
Yeah.
Well, Google Street View and Google Maps and Google sees that as related to usage. And so how many searches per month for the company? How many leads do they get, et cetera? A lot of these cases, they'll bring in an internet expert like myself to pull a lot of that data, show how many views they got. I frequently use SEMrush data, similar web data to show traffic to websites, searches, et cetera,
Yeah.
in the legal cases.
That makes
So
sense now that you
yeah,
put it that way. That makes a lot of sense. And I could say maybe cannibalization could be one. Like, let's say if you and I were partners, Harzer, Sefati Consulting, and then
mhm,
if we split up and I keep the name and yeah, and you go do your own thing, I could still like sometimes outrank you, right? In a search, and I could take some of your business. People are looking for you, but they go to my website. So
sure.
even though your picture is not clearly anywhere, so now that makes sense. Cool, that's awesome. And what like, how do you like? Do you get paid hourly for that? Like, how does it work? I'm just curious. Like, is
So
it
yeah,
per
so
case?
basically
Yeah,
there's about 5 to 6 people who are qualified enough to serve as internet expert witnesses.
yeah,
And in the United States,
hmm
I've done cases in the UK as well. So
yeah,
typically, as far as payment goes, typically there's a retainer fee,
hmm
which is it's you can. The easy answer is you can charge whatever you want. And I've
yeah,
actually talked to different attorneys and they said, you know what? I mean, gosh, you're getting this amount of money per hour and you should be, yeah, I mean, so basically it's anywhere from di- 300 to $500 an hour.
yeah. It's just like legal fees, right? Like very similar to
Yes. And in fact, some lawyers have told me, well, you can get more per hour.
if you were a lawyer.
And then the attorneys, because you're providing this, expertise and so forth. So
Yeah,
typically, a typical case will be a 5 hour upfront retainer fee, $2,000 to $2,500, and then I apply those that though that's the first 5 hours that I worked on the case, give that as a credit. Some cases this past year where they'll pay my retainer fee and I'll be named as a expert witness in the case, and the other side ends up settling the case before I even do any work.
yeah,
But the case I've legally in the court documents and so forth, when they have to file who they expect to call as witnesses. And so if my name is used, then I get the retainer. Some cases, there's been 3 or 4 cases that have paid the retainer fee and I haven't done it. They've used my name and that was enough for them to settle the case or need to settle the case. But in other cases, it's gone, 10, 15, $30,000 of fees. And it's this case out of the UK that has been going that just settled last month, and I've been working on that case for 2 to 3 years. So, and that was a pure SEO related case where a client sued their SEO firm, but there's only been
is that because they did something that hurt them?
they
If you can,
claimed
yeah.
they did, but it was interesting because in that case it was the company got hit by an algorithm update 7 days after the SEO firm started the work.
hmm
And the question was that I don't think the SEO firm could possibly have done anything
Yeah,
in those 7 days
good.
to warrant or to cause the site to be hit by an algorithm update. Because my opinion is that when you have an algorithm update, Google's been working on that for a while. Could be months that they've been working on that, then they roll out the
Yeah,
algorithm update. It's not as if you start the SEO firm 7 days prior does some work, and then all of a sudden, because a few days prior, causes the algorithm to hit.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting case, but like I said, it went on for a while.
That's actually interesting. That happened to us once. It didn't go to the courts. We were accused. We onboarded a client. I can't mention who. Almost like maybe 10 days after they had a huge dip in the rankings, they were pointing fingers at us. We were like, we're barely getting started. We just like added your site to our, SEMrush, and like we haven't
Yeah.
even touched the website, but that wasn't enough for them. And there was a lot of investigation work on my end to try to reason with them. It's like, hey, if you want to fire us, but you can't, like the only way we can really screw you up is by de-indexing your website. But if we reduce rankings, but your website still getting traffic, that's not
Mhm.
us. Because even if you do link spam, that's going to take weeks, months, and I'm like, and we don't even do
Yeah.
link building. So it's interesting you say that. We actually had to go through that. Luckily, we didn't have, this is many years ago, where we were more of an SEO company and not digital marketing. And nowadays, I try to cover my bases, in our agreement, we everything is in there, learned from it. So it's interesting you bring that up. And it's unfortunate that happens. SEO companies, there are bad SEO companies out there that tend to hurt their clients by doing black hat stuff. But in most cases, a lot of times, unfortunately, SEO companies also become scapegoats. And I really don't like that.
Yeah, it turns out the majority of cases that really do need expert witnesses are, I mean, some cases are, where, hundreds of millions of dollars that are
Wow.
that they're suing over. There was one case that was two companies and they had similar names. One was a dictionary word and the other one was a misspelling of the dictionary word. One company claimed that people were searching and clicking on the site and trying to find the other company. And so it was showing online confusion. I had a case where a company in Arizona and a competitor in California, what the SEO firm did was to manipulate auto-suggest so that when they typed the company name, the California company name, let's say it's Zoom and the other company is, Microsoft Teams. Well, those are competitors. So and Zoom is in California and Microsoft is in Arizona.
Yeah.
Well, when you typed in, Zoom Arizona, the other the competitor would show up and they
Yeah.
manipulated auto suggest so that when you typed in Zoom, the other company would show up. And so that was clear, they had manipulated auto suggest. And so that's where, as far as, and then that led to, if you clicked through, then you led to, the company ranking for their competitor's name in the Google search results because the auto suggest had manipulated. So that was kind of a complex, related to SEO very much so. And that an interesting case. And
Yeah.
so that they ended up settling, that never went to court, but that went on for a year or two. So definitely, it has been busy. The January and February every year are when a lot of lawsuits are
Oh, wow.
in and are filed. And
So this is your busy
yeah,
season right now.
it is kind of
Yeah.
starting. I've already had a
Yeah.
couple cases. There's one that has been slow, but it's ongoing. I've got right now 5 cases that are ongoing. So it's interesting. Some are referrals. Some are, if you do a search for SEO expert witness or e-commerce expert witness or domain name expert witness or anything
Mhm.
like that, those are kind of the main keywords.
Yeah, that's what I
Uh,
was going to ask you. How do you find your clients? You're ranking for those things, right?
yes.
But also,
So though,
you also said something about qualification. Out of curiosity, what other qualifications do you have? You must have outside your expertise, many years in industry. Is it an education background that you need to have to be expert witness, or is it
kind of a
pretty much?
well, I would say, in the digital marketing, it's kind of a well-rounded.
Yeah.
For example, there are very specific cases that come up. For example, there's been some cases related to the Amazon manipulation
Mhm.
of the Amazon search results.
Yeah.
And yeah, I actually turned that one down last week because I know all the concepts and so forth, but I don't
Yeah.
have any clients right now or had any clients that that where I'm helping them rank in Amazon. And so it's not necessarily appropriate.
Yeah.
There's others though, like I said, when it comes to forensic research, when it comes to various domain name and pay-per-click, and it's good to be kind of well-rounded. Also, as you grow this is not just for you to be an expert witness. I've talked to SEOs who could qualify, who even have more expertise than I do in some areas, would be great. But they've said, no, there's no way I could be sitting in federal court.
Well, that's me. I try
Testify.
to avoid all illegal stuff as much as possible. I just can't
Yes.
stand it.
But, there's some that are great,
Yeah.
calm, it's a certain personality that is a good expert witness.
Yeah.
But, look at as you grow as a digital marketer,
Mhm.
I would say, number one is, to obviously Google your name
Yeah.
and make sure that, you're well-rounded. If you can speak at conferences, that you can write articles for Search Engine Land's, search
Yeah.
engine journal, etc. Have your own personal website where you publish stuff. And that's always good, and control your own search results for your
Yeah.
name.
The closest thing to this is when I was early days of my IT tech career, when I was a junior
Mhm.
programmer. I used to code in classic C, obviously basic, and then later Visual Basic. And there was a software company that had a Visual Basic when it had just come out and was like a new thing. They were selling a software that was copy of the DOS version, I think it was QBasic version of it. And the expert witness, I wasn't an expert witness, but the expert witness was a college professor, my college professor. And he basically gave us an assignment. He's like, just me and a couple of the teacher's pets. He's like, hey, you guys want to help me with this? Can you guys to go through the code and find the similarities in terms of logic? And obviously, it's two different programming languages, but luckily QBasic and Visual Basic, they were close enough for us to find a lot of similarities. I have that type of, I could help someone like you, for example, pull together data and stuff like that. So that actually I do like doing that. So if you ever need help, let me know. But just getting in front of the judge or the lawyers or the attorneys, even when I go to the jury duty, I try to come up with the excuse to avoid it as much as possible. Just that the whole environment makes me very nervous. I know we are running out of time. I wanted to see if you see any potential legal issues. I know you're not an attorney, but from an SEO perspective, legal issues with usage of AI, especially generative AI on websites. Is there any issues with copyrights, plagiarism? Because who knows where AI is getting those information from, or if they're completely rewriting everything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it does come down to the fact that if you are, you need to edit, and you're
Edit them, yeah,
publishing not AI content, if you will, on your particular website. And so you're
yeah,
responsible for it. And, I think it is unique enough. There's uses of it that are great. I do like the fact that nowadays, when you are querying AI, it gives references. And
yeah,
so it's nice to quote your sources, and it comes down to just a lot of the journalistic type of basic principles. You quote an article and so forth, or you use content, and it's not good to cite your sources. Whether or not AI is generating images, for example,
yeah,
I think there could potentially be, we've seen some interesting lawsuits already regarding images and AI using something.
yeah,
And there is something where, if you take an image and alter it the question is whether or not how much an image can be altered and so forth. So a lot of those principles are still a data. I don't think I think the bottom line is though, is AI is still rather new.
yeah,
And my prediction is, especially on the legal side, is that sure, there are some preliminary, lawsuits. However, in my line of work as an expert witness, it typically takes 2 to 3 years, or maybe even 4 years. Whereas, on a case, somebody, if it goes through the process and actually files a lawsuit,
Yeah.
typically 2 to 3 years later. And
Yeah.
so if somebody is copying content, for example, I'm going to sue somebody because of copy content and it relates to AI and so forth. Okay, I haven't, I'm in the digital marketing or internet industry with lawsuits. I haven't seen those yet. And I think that we're
Yeah.
still, I think it's only been a year or two, maybe two, let's say 2 years, 2.5, maybe the most, maybe 3 years. Okay, where AI has been in the picture and there's
Yeah.
potential for something related to digital marketing. And it hasn't been long enough. I think maybe next year or the following year, we might see some lawsuits that
Yeah.
are maybe related to websites and content or something like that, or somebody who has created, let's say, here's an example that you mentioned. Somebody has an idea for an app
Hmm.
or a website, and they use ChatGPT or an AI to write the code.
Yeah.
And then they take that code,
Hmm.
if it's JavaScript code or PHP code or whatever it
Yeah.
is, and the AI writes the code and they use that code. And then somebody is claiming, oh, well, that particular app is too close to my app, or they sue them. And then the person says, oh, well, this is all AI code. So
Yeah.
that could be a very interesting dynamic that could come down.
Yeah, we're definitely going to see some sort of legal issues with coding because, especially if you don't have a restrict policy, like if you allow your programmers to use ChatGPT as a cheat sheet, and then they do that, and then generative AI is able to generate based on previous experience. With content, you can put in copyscape, you can edit it, but with code, is a little bit. I'm curious to see what's going to come out of it. I know we are running out of time, and I know we can talk about this forever, but let's. Where do people find you and how they can get hold of you?
Sure. It's my last name, Hartzer.com, which
Hmm.
luckily I got, years, back 2000, early 2000s. So
Lucky.
registered that. Hartzer.com or BillHartzer.com. There's new services out there where if you have a company name, a brand, a celebrity name, or a personal name, you can actually block domain names from
Oh,
being
wow.
registered.
Okay.
So if, let's say Clarity Digital, you can actually pay us. There's two different services, Global Block and Name Block, and you can pay us an annual fee per year. And Name Block is about $100 per year per TLD. So if somebody goes to register Clarity Digital dot
Yeah.
shop or
Yeah.
Clarity Digital dot whatever, it will come up as being not available to register.
And
And
that's your company?
it's done. I am a actually reseller of those two services,
Got it. Got it.
and otherwise you have to go through a domain name registrar. But if you want to block Clarity Digital or or Bill Hartzer or
Yeah.
I've actually have placed blocks on Hartzer,
Yeah.
and so nobody can register any domain that includes the word Hartzer in it, and that's domain
That's
blocking.
really, I'm glad you mentioned that. I've actually been thinking about that because we're launching another website, an AI consulting called Clarity Digital AI, and I'm like very soon. And now this podcast, we're gonna sit on our website, but eventually we might want to do Clarity Digital that podcast or whatever. I'm like, we got to own that domain, so I will contact you when I'm ready. And that's
Sure.
good to know. I didn't know that could be done.
Yeah, and a lot of companies, major companies like, for example, Walmart
I was always
or
wondering how they
major
did that. Yeah.
brands. Yes, there are the domain blocking services now. Rather than having somebody just create the name and then you have to go after them, you can block it ahead of time.
That's
Which is
awesome.
great.
Good to know.
So yes, Hartzer.com. I also have my domain name service is DN Access, letter D, letter N for domain name, and dnaccess.com, which is out there as well.
Awesome. Well, Bill, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate
Sure.
you being following you for some years, and you definitely know your stuff. So I'm really honored to have you here. Thank you so much, and have a good
Great.
one.
Okay, thanks.
Take care. Bye.